Good morning, Flagler. The doctors are in. I'm Dr. Scott Cleos.
And I'm Dr. Andrea Cleos.
And we are here once again to talk about your health and health issues right here in Flagler, Volusia, and St. Johns County. I got to brag for a second about my colleagues down at Halifax. We've had a couple of friends of the family or a family of friends, so on and so forth, who've come down with some medical issue, and they called us for assistance. And, of course, I was able to call over and get them into my hospital. And the care that they were given at that institution was top-notch. And I'm so proud of my colleagues because, you know, they really went above and beyond. And, you know, I know some of it is because I know the people there, but I really think that they're making an impact on these people's lives. And I'll give you a for instance, one of our friends who's elderly lives by herself. She's 80-some years old, and she has a boyfriend who's 80-some years old, and they love to dance, right? And she fell down and had a really big hematoma on her head and was scared, and I understand that. And she really didn't want to go into any of the hospitals near where she lived, and she asked if we could get her. And so I called up, you know, one of the people in the ED, who I didn't know that well.
Well, she asked where she should go, and we told her we could help if you went to a location.
Went to Halifax.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, where I work. And so we got her in. I called one of my buddies who got her in. They took care of her. They actually sent us pictures of her boyfriend dancing with the nurses, which I thought was awesome. I mean, you know, they took great care of her. I mean, not to say that they just went there and danced.
I think the boyfriend was actually keeping everyone interested and happy, too.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
At 83, he has a great heart and sense of humor, and he's also a very happy guy and loves dancing.
Which goes to show you that you can impact many people's lives by your attitude, right?
Absolutely.
So, you know, if you come in there and you act like you really enjoy being where you're being, that's contagious. I mean, you know, and if you come in there all full of piss and vinegar, yelling and spitting and screaming, that's also contagious. Everyone gets upset. But, you know, the fact that they came in there and they needed someone during this mini crisis, and they didn't know, everything worked out well, but the experience was also I believe, memorable. And we've had a couple of issues like that or situations where, you know, a couple of our friends were at other institutions, not necessarily local, and family members called us up and said, listen, I really don't think they're getting...
Some were local.
And some were local, but I don't want to, you know, say any hospital in particular, but they felt like their loved one wasn't getting the attention they need, and we would transfer them over, and lo and behold, they weren't getting the attention they need because they came over really, really sick. And I'm not sure what was going on at the outside institution, but they were able to kind of, you know, whittle down some problems, you know, electrolyte issues and maybe lack of sleep, lack of nutrition.
Electrolytes like sodium, potassium, magnesium, right. Things like that.
So, you know, they slowly correct those things, and it's amazing how well people do once you normalize their lab. So just a shout out to my colleagues at Halifax. I'm really proud of what you guys are doing. I know none of them are probably listening to this, but thank you for, you know, making us awesome each and every day. On the flip side, I can tell you some experiences I've had. And, you know, we have a lot of physician extenders now, and you know how I feel. Some of the physician extenders we have are awesome. I mean, they're really, really good. And I don't want to, you know,
you have some of those that are amazing that work for radiology.
Yeah, I mean, we have some in our, but the way they work for us is they do procedures under the auspices of a radiologist. They're not functioning independently, right? Where I have a problem is where you have the nurse practitioner or the PA who's basically unsupervised and caring for the patient. I just think that is inappropriate. I will always think it's inappropriate.
If they've had 25, 30 years of experience and but when they haven't had experience or knowledge and they're ordering
it's still inappropriate.
Tests.
It's still inappropriate. I don't care how much experience you have. You're not the doctor. And like I said, when I was an intern at the first PA that I met was when I was an intern up in Virginia. And the girl that was the PA was awesome. And she could have easily been a doctor. I mean, I'm walking around with like one or two charts in my hand. She's got like 12 of them and knew everything about everything. And I used to look at her and be like, oh my God, this girl is awesome. But, you know, she had the experience, like you said. At the end of the day, that's great. But you still, when you go to the hospital to see the doctor, you expect them at least to stop in and say hi, or make sure that the plan that is being, drawn out by the PA or the physician extender was thoroughly reviewed by the doctor themselves. And, I always look at physician extenders as, people who are helping the doctor get through their day. So they may do the initial physical examination or history, whatever, discuss it with the doctor. But at some point in time, I think it's imperative the doctor stop in and say hi, because sometimes the patient will say something to the doctor they don't say to anyone else. And I've had it happen to me multiple times, where they say something to the PA, or they are deemed difficult to deal with, and I walk in the room with MD after my name, and they seem to relax and open up and tell me things that weren't told by my, extenders. And so I think that's the reason you have to have a doctor overseeing nurse practitioners and PAs. And I think it's criminal not to have that done. And they're getting, the nurse practitioners are trying really hard to practice independently, which is a mistake. They're going so far as that another doctors of nurse practitioner. In multiple states, they've tried to use that, quote, doctor of nurse practitioner as a way to call themselves doctor, which is deceptive. They're not a medical doctor. You are a PhD, in nurse practicing, but you can't say that you're a doctor of medicine. That's my personal feeling. And the FMA fought very hard to prevent that from happening in the state of Florida. And I think the similar issue just came up in California and was shot down because it was considered deceptive. So, the problem is, if you're not in a teaching institution, I have conversations now that I haven't had in 20 years. I'm talking to people who haven't been to medical school, and, they're trying to ask me questions about a test that was ordered and the results. And for instance, I had one that, they ordered a CT, they did an ultrasound, and they said, the internal jugular vein is thrombosed. There was a catheter in there, and, there may be some, occlusion, or there may be some thrombus in there, but they couldn't tell, right? So everyone's freaking out that there's thrombus in the internal jugular. Because I've been dealing with this for 30 years, when you put a catheter in someone's jugular, almost all of them form some kind of thrombus. You're blocking the vein, right? Especially if it's a non-dominant vein. So, I'll get phone calls like, the patient has thrombus in their internal jugular. We need to remove that catheter and move it to another site. It's like, what's going to happen if I take the catheter out of that vein and put it in the vein on the other side? They're going to get a thrombus on that side. So now they're going to have a thrombus on both sides. What you do is you just leave that one there, and you can put some warm compresses on there if you want to put on some anticoagulation, and just let it be. That's not going to cause any problems. This was a nurse, and she was very, very nice, but she's telling me this story, and she goes, I just need to know if there's thrombus there. And this is what she did. She ordered the ultrasound. She ordered the CT. She consulted vascular surgery, who told her there's nothing they're going to do about it. So then she's calling me to figure out what she can do about this thrombus in the internal jugular vein.
So how many resources were wasted?
So,
how much money was spent?
So here we go, with all the studies, all the consults, everything else, and she's not getting the answer she wants, so she's still calling me asking what to do. And I said, this is what I want you to do. I want you to do nothing. She goes, what? I go, I want you to stop talking about this little tiny jugular vein in the left side. I don't care if it's thrombosed or it's occluded. It's irrelevant. Nobody's going to do anything about this. If you want to put the patient on a little tincture of heparin, if that makes you feel better, I think that's absolutely fine. Nobody is going to, vascular surgery is not going to do anything about, this little narrowed vein. People have asymmetric veins in their neck all the time. One of them's bigger than the other. So you got to stop talking about it, move on to something else. And, and I'm taking time out of my busy day to explain to her, probably for the 5th time after 4 other doctors told her the same thing, that she needs to stop worrying about it. I guarantee she probably went and talked to somebody else afterwards. But this is the problem.
So it's an education. They need education they didn't have.
It's an education and experience. You got to know when something is a problem or a potential problem for the patient. This is not it. There's probably other there's probably other issues that patient has to deal with, but the occlusion of the jugular vein isn't it, because people have occluded veins all the time, either, natural. If you look at people when they talk, oftentimes you'll see that one jugular is more dominant than the other. You'll see one side bulging when they're talking, and that's just the way God made them. It's not that anything has to be done about it. That's just how they are. If you're looking for a source of pulmonary embolus and you can't find anything down below, and they've got a clotted left upper extremity that's all full, that's an issue. But, a little bit of a clot in an internal jugular vein means nothing, but, you would know that if you had medical training, formal medical training. So that's my soapbox for the week.
Yeah, so, we went through the same thing when we were in Gainesville, and I started the hospitals program, and I've talked about this on the show before. So a hospitalist program, it's not hospice, end of life. It is the in-hospital service where doctors only work in the hospital. And now that training is a completely separate training. You actually have to have certain board certification to be a hospitalist. I was one of the very first people who started that program in the VA, or was the very first person that started that program for the VA in Gainesville, and I and another physician. And so we would take care of the critically ill on the floors, and we'd work with the intensivists, which were the people who were the pulmonology specialists who dealt with people on ventilators.
But even that is a subspecialty.
And that's another subspecialty
the intensivists actually have their own training. They may not be trained in pulmonology at all. So.
Right. So interestingly enough, when we came over to start the hospitalist program, this other physician and I, we had residents that were not being supervised. So these were MDs who were in their residency training, and they were not being supervised, and had many similar situations like this nurse practitioner that Scott was talking about. And they would order a lot of consults when they didn't understand things because they weren't being supervised and didn't have anyone to reach out to during the day because their attending was in his office or in her office taking care of patients, and then would come at the end of the day to oversee what they had done. They would usually meet in the morning and then meet in the evening. And so many tests, so many radiologic tests, blood tests, unnecessary consults, radiation exposure was done. And at that point, the VA said, we need to stop. We need to not hire. We need to have a higher level of training and education. And so as us being hospitalists, we were there all the time. And so we ended up saving them lots of money because we'd explain to the residents when to order the exams and when not to order the exams. And as a result of that, we saved so much money that the VA, within 3 or 4 months, increased our base pay by over $30,000, which in the VA system was a lot back 25 years ago. So there is an importance of training, because what happens is if you don't have a well-trained physician who understands disease and disease pathology, they will order a lot of unnecessary tests, blood tests and x-rays, and ancillary consultations to specialists. And you just run around to a bunch of people wasting a lot of money, and insurance costs go through the roof. And then those people order a bunch more tests, and you have no one really regulating a good, reasonable care plan of care.
That's happening again.
And it's happening again.
And they now have data because, our government in their infinite wisdom is facilitating these physician extenders as primary care docs. And they said
all over the state.
All over the country. They said, okay, well, we don't need doctors today. We'll have these. So now they have documentation that they overutilize diagnostic and laboratory services. So now that is costing the government more money because there's more tests being ordered. And
they're ordering more consults.
And more consults. So what they do is, because it always has to be budget neutral, they are ratcheting down the price of laboratory and diagnostic services. So it's getting harder and harder to recruit people to read radiographs or to do labs, because the government doesn't want to pay for it anymore. And it's a system that they created. They screwed it up, and they want someone to read it for free to basically bail them out of their idiocy, which is what we do all the time because, the government, they're not smart, unfortunately. They think they are.
Analyze systems, and they don't listen to the end users and the end.
No, they're stupid. I mean, because
tried to speak
because
to them.
people in the
state
government,
of Florida, we did go with the FMA. We did speak to them about this was not a great
idea. They don't
idea.
care, right?
But their lobbyists from the other side have a lot more money and a lot more power.
Yeah.
And at
the problem is in their government, we've let the ignorant lead us, because people who are smart are actually doing something where they don't have time to be in a leadership position in government, So it used to be an honor to be elected to a position. Now, people who don't have any skill sets go into politics because they know it's a way for them to get rich and be stupid. I mean, look at AOC. She's probably one of the stupidest people I've ever seen. That woman's killing it up there. And, she's a moron. But, this is what's happening to our government in general. They're making vacuous decisions that the rest of us are suffering through. And they're slowly destroying everything that used to be great about this country. I mean, when Andrew and I first started doing our, residency, everyone came to the United States for health care because it was the best health care system in the world. That's not true anymore. I promise you that's not true. But people, you never heard of people going from the northern states into Canada for their health care, or people, leaving the United States to go over to Europe to go get their health care. You'd had some people flying down to Mexico to get some kind of sham, injection into their buttocks with some tire inflator, but those people usually suffered the consequences of their stupidity and died from that, from sepsis and stuff like that. But for the most part, the healthcare that was being delivered was, bar none, the best in the United States. And they're slowly
in the world.
I mean, the best in the world. And they're slowly ruining it. And it's just tough for those of us who have seen what it used to be, watch this deteriorate. But as we're going through all this, I do see opportunities. If you have the right leadership and you've got, groups of doctors and administrators who are willing to work together to do something good, you can really stand out, because there's a sea of mediocrity out there. And if you got, a healthcare system that shows a modicum of common sense and caring, they're going to bubble to the top very quickly. And that's my goal with my own institution. But we're going to take a quick break. If you have any questions for myself or Dr. Andrew, you can email us at thedoctorsin, DOCTORISIN at WNZF.com. You're listening to The Doctor's In on WNZF News Radio, 1550 AM, 94.9 FM. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment.
Radiology Associates has been a trusted name in Volusia, Flagler, and St. Johns County for over 50 years. Radiology Associates is the first and only radiology provider to bring our neighbors of Flagler County 3 Tesla MRI, 64 slice CT, and time-of-flight PET CT in our Palm Coast Imaging and Town Center Imaging locations. This is our community. Our doctors live here and strive to provide only the best care to you, our neighbors. For more information about Radiology Associates, visit us online at radiologyassociatesimaging.com.
Thank you so much for recommending us to your family and friends. When you need a 30, 60, or 90-minute massage, it's real easy to book your appointment online. MassageByNatalie.org. MassageByNatalie.org.
Are you wondering if that old paint in your garage is still any good?
Bring it in. We'll let you know.
And while you're at it, if you need to match a color,
chip off some paint and bring it in.
Our color matching is unmatched.
Benjamin Moore, corner of Old Kings and Utility Drive.
Palm Coast.
And we're back. For those of you just joining us, I was on a soapbox or ranting and raving.
Well, it's frustrating.
It's frustrating.
It's incredibly frustrating.
I started off saying some good things about my colleagues and my institution and how well I think they're doing now. But
so go Halifax if you guys are ill.
Go Halifax. And, the problem is most institutions are not living up to those expectations. And it's a shame. And I just think...
And it may not be the institution, but if you have one bad egg... All it takes is one bad or two bad people in a system, and the other one's not able to correct those.
Well,
that's a tough thing. And if you don't eliminate those people or point out what mistakes they're making, it's a real serious problem.
That's the key, in my opinion. It's the culture you establish. And I've told my colleagues this many times. I go, if we have a culture that...
Of mediocrity,
or we allow... physicians to denigrate or, basically be nasty to the nurses or the nurse practitioners. And I gave you the story about a nurse, but I didn't tell her that she was not smart. Okay. I know she didn't know. And I just said, look, you don't need to worry about this. I want you to stop thinking about this. It's not going to affect the patient. And she was thankful for me taking the time. So there's a way to present it so that you're not demeaning or degrading. And that's the problem. If you let that fly and the medical staff permits a culture of negativity, that's what's going to permeate through the system. And the problem is, if that's your baseline culture, the patients realize what's going on, even if because people walk around miserable. You walk in, you just got, beaten down by the subspecialist you tried to consult. You go in to see the patient, you're trying to explain to them why the orthopedist or someone's not going to come see them today. And you're upset because of the conversation you had earlier. The patient's going to pick up on that and they're going to feel. But if you walk in and say, hey, I saw, so-and-so came and saw you. I hope it was a good visit, and you're positive, and the nurses are positive, and everyone who walks in there shows that they're caring, what an impact that can make, right?
Right. And, the other thing is when we don't do things ethically correct, and sometimes you make mistakes, and in medicine, doctors are definitely fallible. We're not robots, and that's why AI one day will be a great, and it has been a great assistance. And so if it's used wisely and it is accurate, then it can be a great help to mitigate mistakes. But when somebody already had a CT scan in the community of the abdomen or of the head or an MRI of the head, there's no reason to get another one a week later. Or 2 weeks later.
Or a day later.
Or a day later.
Sometimes we see them day after day.
This is not appropriate. This radiation exposure is inappropriate. It's inappropriate of utilization and overutilization of staff and equipment. It's inappropriate for insurance because I don't know if they would keep covering that or paying that. I don't know what happens.
Well, in a hospital.
But it's something that we all need to stand up for. So if you just had scans, CT scans of your abdomen or your head or MRIs, you need to speak up as a patient. You don't need to have them again. And you have to explain, why are you doing this again when I've already had them?
Well, especially if your symptoms haven't changed, right?
Right.
I mean, that's the definition of idiocy, is repeating the same or doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Now, it's different if the patient comes in and, they had left upper quadrant pain that was extreme. We did the scan, it was negative, and they come in and now they have right lower quadrant pain and, guarding. So that may be a reason to repeat it. But if they come in, on Tuesday and I say, oh man, I got this left upper quadrant. I've had it for, this whole month here. And they scan them and they're negative and they come in 2 days later with the same exact description. There's no sense repeating it, right? I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me how they will repeat the scans over and over again as if there's some kind of magical, machine that will give you a diagnosis despite everything being exactly the same as it was 2 days ago. It's never going to change.
So one thing that helps, if you can, and sometimes people can't, but if you have a file with your recent lab results and your last scans, keep it. And if you go to the hospital, give it to your family and have them take it home, but take it with you to the hospital, show the doctors, and then take it home. Don't let them keep it. And always keep a file of your records. If you're traveling on vacation, take them with you, because this prevents reoccurrence of unnecessary utilization of cost. And if we as consumers do not help regulate cost and overutilization, it's very dangerous because one, the cost of healthcare continues to rise, but two, it's a waste, and we need to be responsible for waste. We shouldn't, one, put ourselves under that degree of radiation or that need of sticking another needle in or another lab in if we don't need it. And it's so important that we become good stewards of use, and when it's not necessary, not to do it. So it's, just because we have doesn't mean we should continue to have more and more and more and more. And it's not healthy.
Well, again, some of this is CYA and defensive, right? People are afraid of getting sued, so they keep ordering stuff over and over again. So that's the other thing we've got to, reform. Right now, the new thing is, cyber attacks are a big thing. They're on the rise, and people are figuring out creative ways to breach systems, get into sensitive patient data, and then they have some kind of ransomware where if you don't pay them, millions of dollars, they're going to share this information. So to add a little salt in the wound, after that happens, and the hospital system has to pay out millions of dollars to, what are they called? Class action suit lawyers come in. And this is their new big thing. They love this stuff because now they can come in and sue on behalf of all these people who have been harmed by this data breach, and then they sue the hospital. So, everyone wants to sue the hospital. It's like, unbelievable. I mean, you should be suing the company that was supposed to be guarding the data, not the hospital, but they probably don't have the money. So, but I mean, it's just a messed up system, between the litigious nature of medicine in this country, the inexperience of allowing people who don't have the appropriate training to be the primary, caregivers for patients. And, to tell you the truth, the doctors that are coming out of training right now have a different mindset. I mean, we always felt going into medicine was a vocation. It was not a job. It was something that you dedicated your life to, and you were lucky enough to be chosen, to serve the, what is that from the
populace
to serve the people, right? I mean, so, you sometimes sacrificed your free time. You stayed late. Now this newer generation of doctors, they want
40 hours a week.
They want 40 hours. I always hear them talking about I need a life-work balance. I'm like, we shouldn't have gone into medicine. That's not a life-work balance because, in medicine, unfortunately, sometimes you got to stay a little late. I mean, I've had patients or family members who call me up, and I'm busy down in the interventional suite, and they're like, oh, Mr. Johnson's family's not happy. We didn't get to him today, and they want to talk to someone. I'm like, look, I'm kind of stuck down here. Tell them when I get out, which may not be till like 7 or 8, I will come up and talk to them. Or if they want to leave a phone number, but I don't ignore them, right? I don't say, well, that's too bad. I'm too busy. I'm not going to talk to them because they want to talk to me. So I figure out some way that I'm going to communicate to them, and then I explain what's going on and why we're not doing that, in the middle of the night when I'm tired, exhausted, and probably not at 100%. And they understand, and, they just want someone to communicate to them. They don't want to, feel like they're being ignored. But
one of the other things that it was a very great quality in medicine in the years past, and we do have some of it now, is our relationship with each other as physicians. I could easily call a colleague and say, hey, I've got this patient. I'd like you to see him. Sure, no problem. We'll get him on the schedule right away. Give me the name. Give me the contact. We'll get him in. And this is the purpose of medical societies, why we have Flagler Medical Society, which Scott and I are both part of, and Volusia County Medical Society, and we used to be part of St. John's County Medical Society, because you just don't know where your patients are going to end up, or the people you love, or your friends, or your family, or where they're going to be. And so we know somebody in all of those counties that we can reach out to in many different directions to try to help. And that's why it's important to develop a relationship for physicians and a community of physicians to spend time together and to do activities together so that we interact to get to know each other well, but also interact for each other. We even had relationships with our legal teams, our lawyers. We would have after-hours activities with them as well. And I think it helps build a stronger, more friendly, but also more beneficial community for our patients and for our families.
Well, you understand the culture, and, having some of those mixers, you find out that when patients are litigious, it's usually because they're being ignored, or you don't want to get out of bed in the middle of the night. Those are the ones I see. Mistakes happen. People die no matter what. The body is pretty resilient. But if you take the attitude, I'm too tired to come in, the patient dies after you say, I'm not coming in, you're getting sued, right? That's malpractice. If you come in, you make an attempt, or you say that's beyond my scope of care, then that's, at least you did what you could.
Or transfer the patient to
somebody
who
who can do it. But so there's a lot of factors in there that you can, but for the most part, I think everyone just wants you to be a good doctor and do the best that you can.
And I do think that during COVID, a lot of the passive and unhealthy behavior in medicine occurred because patients were locked out from their family members to represent their families. Nobody was being overseen in hospital systems, and it was a very destructive period. And we developed a lot of paranoia and doubt, but hopefully over time we'll be changing that.
100%. Okay, guys, that's all the time we have. If you have any questions for myself or Dr. Andrew, you can email us at thedoctorsin@WNZF.com. Stay happy, stay healthy. We'll see you next time. The doctors are out.